If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you'll know that adult obesity is frequently addressed from various perspectives. However, less so, but equally as concerning, is childhood obesity, with as many as 5% of school-aged children in Europe suggested to be obese, and this figure tripled in North America. Unfortunately, these statistics only worsen elsewhere, where financial resources are less. Children have around 2 times the increased risk for being overweight or obese in low-income countries compared to those of high income, and approximately 2.5 times that in countries under economic crisis. One reason why the weight status of children is often overlooked is because of the presumption that they will simply grow into their bodies once they reach adolescence or adulthood. Yet, since 60% of obese children are estimated to become obese adults later in life, you can see why this belief can be harmful. Therefore, today we'll be touching on 7 of the top causes of childhood obesity. But first, as always, please take note of our disclaimer. Of course, poor diet has long been known as a fundamental contributor to childhood obesity. Diets high in saturated and trans fats, oils, sweetened drinks and salt makes the likelihood of becoming obese worse, while diets high in good fat and complex carbs reduce the risk. So meals based around this can help keep that weight in check. Yet the timing of meals may also be necessary for limiting the potential for weight gain later down the line. In one study, in 2012, the researchers found that children who had breakfast, lunch and dinner each day had an almost 2/3 lesser risk of becoming overweight than children that didn't. The supervision of children with their food choices is another thing to keep in mind when it comes to corpulence, as they tend to choose foods higher in calories and less in nutritional value when left to decide alone. In addition, kids who eat at home more often are less likely to become obese than kids who are taken to restaurants and/or fast food outlets regularly by their parents. However, it's important to point out that it's not just the what, where and when of foods that can be key determinants in whether they become overweight, but also dietary aspects which may not seem obvious at first, like being breastfed as a baby. Many studies suggest that breastfeeding helps to limit the development of childhood obesity, although the reason is still uncertain. One way put forward is that breast milk contributes to how our metabolism is programmed and how fast we grow due to its nutrient content and biological effects. Also, direct breastfeeding has been linked to better control of appetite later in childhood. Secondly, screen time, referring to the amount of time someone uses a cell phone, television, games console, or computer, has been indicated by several studies to contribute to childhood obesity through the consumption of fewer fruits and vegetables and more calorically dense foods, increased portion sizes, and subsequently more overall calories consumed daily. This is because ads promoting fatty foods or sugary drinks will often serve as a trigger for these items. And since screen time makes us more distracted while eating, we are less mindful of satiety as a result. Further, screen time can negatively impact physical activity and sleep too. In 2004, Matheson et al. Found that 1/3 of children's overall daily calories were consumed in front of a screen, as well as half of their meals. Taking into account that another study found that children between 8 and 18 years old spend as much as 7.5 hours daily on screen time, the sheer amount of food consumed at screen time doesn't come as a surprise really. Next, evidence suggests that decreased physical activity levels are linked with childhood obesity. Be aware that the advised physical activity levels per week between adults and children are different. You've likely heard of the standard 150 minutes of moderate intense exercise per week, but this is actually for adults, and increases to 60 minutes per day for children. But unfortunately, worldwide, only 1 in 5 children and adolescents meet these recommendations by WHO, while less than half meet these recommendations in most European countries. On the other hand, suppose overweight and obese children adhere to these physical activity guidelines. In that case, another study by Hong et al. In 2016 suggests that they can cut their risk of being overweight and obese in the future by half. Therefore, we cannot understate the value of getting children out and getting moving. Another key influencer that is linked to childhood obesity is family factors. For instance, the ratio of healthy to unhealthy food present in a household will directly be determined by the food preferences of the one who does the shopping. which will impact the number of calories a child consumes each day. At the same time, the person who prepares the meals for the child will affect how many calories are ingested at each sitting, the level of satiety they gain for the following hours, and their portion size. In addition, research has shown that having an overweight mother or living with one parent makes children more susceptible to becoming overweight or obese, while children born into family stress, father absence, maternal depression, and an unclean home are also more likely to have a higher BMI at age 21. Moreover, women who smoke throughout pregnancy may increase the likelihood of their child becoming obese. But oddly enough, the way smoking during pregnancy is suggested to do this is because it predisposes infants to be underweight initially. I'll explain. Countless studies have confirmed the relationship between smoking and low birth weight. One example can be seen from a 2018 cross-sectional study carried out in Brazil. In it, the researchers found that on average, when mothers smoked 6 to 10 cigarettes per day while pregnant, the birth weight was 320 grams lower in infants. This effect is proposed to arise from cigarette nicotine content, although the correlation is not yet fully understood. Nicotine causes a reduction in uteroplacental circulation, which normally would be how a fetus gets adequately nourished. Subsequently, the insufficient nourishment of the fetus, as a result of smoking during pregnancy, may incline infants to have a lower birth weight. Besides this, it's also worth keeping in mind that cigarettes and their smoke can contain over 4,000 potentially toxic substances, which could be a factor too. Now, you may say, well, if smoking during pregnancy causes low birth weight, shouldn't this result in kids being underweight rather than overweight? And yes, you would think so. However, the research suggests otherwise. For instance, one systematic review and meta-analysis that took data from over 84,000 children found that when pregnant women smoked, the risk of their child becoming overweight at ages 3 to 33 increased by 50%. Like the correlation between smoking during pregnancy and low birth weight, the exact mechanisms underlying the link between low birth weight and later development of weight gain are unclear. Maybe it's due to a psychological complex, as well as bodily physiological compensatory mechanisms that may arise from having a low birth weight, like increased hunger hormone secretion or slower metabolism, for example. Anyway, whatever the case, this just emphasizes how dangerous smoking during pregnancy is. Worryingly, another family factor that may be contributing to childhood obesity is that many parents have trouble noticing if their child is overweight or even obese. A 2014 study investigating the number of parents globally who misjudged their children's weight status found that almost 1 in 2 parents failed to recognize if their child was overweight. Needless to say, this is concerning because if parents don't know if their child has a weight issue, the chance of them taking the appropriate steps toward improving their diet and physical activity to reduce the weight, or even prevent further weight gain for that matter, is less subsequently. On the other hand, alternative research suggests it may actually be a good thing if parents don't notice their child is being overweight, as it could lead to the child becoming more overweight in the long term due to the negative attitude of family members towards them because of the stigma associated. In comparison, another study suggests that parents who notice their child's weight is above average may be more inclined to provide food for comfort or more likely to try to force them to become skinnier, which could result in disordered eating. So, factors exacerbating childhood obesity can arise from parents being aware of their child's weight status, as well as being unaware, highlighting just one tricky area in tackling the problem. On a side note, if you are interested in undertaking our evidence-based and results-backed personalised Plato weight management program, please click the link in the top right-hand corner of the video or follow the link in the description. Furthermore, less than ideal psychological factors may be another way childhood obesity occurs. Sadly, depression is quite prevalent in youths, with 2% of children under 12 years old estimated to have major depressive disorder and up to 8% in adolescents. Depression is suggested to contribute to childhood obesity due to the emotional eating that frequently coincides, which is eating in response to negative emotions. Besides depression, anxiety might also be something to take into account psychologically. Anxiety is estimated by the CDC to affect approximately 1 in 10 children in the US and may play a part in childhood obesity in 3 ways. Firstly, cortisol is released in reaction to the stress that can arise from anxiety, a hormone that enhances appetite. Secondly, because anxiety is not a welcoming feeling, some people could use calorically dense foods as a form of coping because they can quickly release happy hormones, improving how they feel momentarily. And lastly, the associated stress can sap their mental and physical energy, leading children who are regularly anxious not to be physically active as often as they should. Further, since overweight children are often bullied or teased about their weight, the prevalence of depression and anxiety among them is most likely higher than in the general population. This then brings us to the second last contributor to childhood obesity that we'll be discussing today: the food environment that children grow up in. The food environment has been defined as a consumer interface with the food system in their locality, including the convenience, affordability, availability, and desirability of foods. An example of the influence the food environment may have on children's diets can be seen from a study in the US, including over 40,000 youths, which examined how close the availability of several types of food establishments was to the participants' homes affected their weight status. The study found that those who lived closer to supermarkets had a lower weight status than those living the furthest away. The authors of the study believed that this was because the access to more healthy foods like fruits and vegetables led to fewer calories being consumed daily, and due to the tendency of supermarkets to have more varied and reasonably priced foods than fast food outlets. Also, because time and money are important variables contributing to parents' daily food decision making, living closer to supermarkets makes it easier for them to travel to and buy healthier food more frequently. Comparatively, those closest to a fast food outlet had a higher weight status than those living furthest away, likely due to more weekly takeaways containing bad fat and refined carbohydrates, with less good fat and whole carbohydrates, increasing the calories from each meal. Yet, it's not just a child's food environment that can make them more prone to becoming overweight, as the built environment where they grow up can also be a factor. The built environment includes aspects of a person's surrounding community, such as the availability of parks, cycling infrastructure, walkability, and recreational facilities, all of which play a role in how physically active children are. In fact, one study found that children from poor built environments were 50% less likely to engage in physical activity. However, it's not just a lack of opportunities for exercise that makes children more likely not to partake, but also the safety of where they live, which is another aspect of the built environment. This is because even in poor built environments where parks are present, providing a place for children to play sports and run around and play, they also serve as a place for homeless persons to seek shelter and/or are used as a meeting place for drug or alcohol use and gang activity, resulting in children not wanting to go, even if they're allowed to. So much so that one study found that when parents did not feel safe in their communities, their kids had over 2 times greater odds of becoming obese. In closing, numerous variables can influence childhood obesity, such as diet, screen time, physical inactivity, psychological factors, family factors, the food environment, and the built environment. Therefore, by bettering these factors, where possible, we can help in the treatment and prevention of childhood obesity, and subsequently improve the mental and physical health of future generations. What are your thoughts on childhood obesity? Do you know any helpful ways to manage it? We'd love to hear from you in the comments section down below. Additionally, if you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. So that has been our video. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.